I'm delighted to come back into the real world of CPAs. I lived there many years, but now being in academia, I don't touch this very often. But my job here today is to give you a bit of perspective about what's happening in accounting education. After all, you were all students of ours once upon a time, and the students that we have today are going to be sitting in your seats sometime in the future. So I think it's important to both of us that we in education are doing what we need to do to prepare for the CPAs of the future. As you know, I'm here representing the American Accounting Association, which is the association for primarily academic accountants, not exclusively. And we focus our attention and efforts on realizing our vision. And the AAA's vision is to be thought leaders in accounting. And under a mission is a vision is our mission, and that is to further the discipline and profession of accounting through education, research, and teaching. And we accomplish our mission by doing 4 things: expanding knowledge and idea development, promoting effective learning, informing and influencing policy and practice, and advancing faculty careers. Now, I'm sharing this with you because what we try to do at the AAA is keep our eye on our mission and what we're trying to do at all times and develop strategies for achieving these things. And that's the context in which I want to talk to you today. With an eye on accomplishing our mission, we are constantly trying to stay current with what's on the horizon, because we are trying to train the CPAs, the accountants of the future, and therefore it's up to us to think about what is coming in the future, what is the best way to serve the profession. So in particular, at the moment, we've been doing some what we call environmental scanning, which is scanning the environment to see what's going on, in connection with a project we have underway at the moment that we call sharpening our vision. That is, we have a current strategic plan, but we want to look at what we see on the horizon now and see how we have to tweak that to better achieve our objectives. And some of the things we're looking at, as you can imagine, are demographic factors, technological forces, economic conditions, political forces, competitive factors, things like that, as they affect the accountants. We put in place a process to gain insights into these things, chatting with people, reading, doing research, trying to figure out how we can get information on these factors, and then think about what the AAA needs to do to incorporate these insights into our thinking and our practice and our planning. Right now, we are in the process of setting up task forces to look at some of the issues that I'm going to talk to you about today, to think about them more deeply and to come up with some ideas on what the AAA should be doing. Many of these things that I'm going to talk about today aren't going to surprise you, and I think you've heard about them over the last day or so, but I think they merit attention, and particularly attention for educators. Educators typically think of our professional activities as in 3 spheres: teaching, research, and service. And when I think about teaching, there are many aspects of that, the faculty side and the student side. So the first thing about teaching is that we have noticed is the demographics of faculty is changing. The average professor is now 57 or 58 years old. There's a growing percentage of non-tenure track faculty as opposed to tenure track faculty. And just like you, we're feeling all kinds of pressure to do more with less. And there's lots of rising expectations on teaching and on research. The cost of education is increasing at an extremely high rate, and people look to the educators and say, what is the problem here? The growth in the number of students that we deal with is slowing down. And of course, there's technology. We heard about some of this morning from Barry Melanson. Technology is having a huge impact on who, how, and what we teach in the classroom. So let me just touch on each of these, or some of these. This is a graph that shows the percentage of academically qualified, as we refer to them, which is really meaning PhDs, faculty versus professionally qualified faculty, faculty who don't necessarily have academic credentials, but have a wealth of experience to share with our students in the classroom. And it may not look very dramatic to you, but there's a clear trend downwards in academically qualified and a clear trend upward in professionally qualified. And frankly, we don't see this changing. And it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it's different. It's different from the way we normally think about our faculty in terms of going through programs and PhD programs and becoming academics. We need to think about better ways to incorporate non-academically qualified, professionally qualified people into our classroom, into the educational programs to keep them relevant. Right now, we break them into two groups, professionally qualified and academically qualified, but it's becoming so important to us that we're breaking it down further, probably each group into two different groups depending on the type of scholarship that they do, for example. But this is something that we're monitoring and trying to figure out how to handle. Again, it's a good thing, not a bad thing, but structurally within our schools, we have to figure out how to make sure that these people work together effectively and together. You've seen many articles in the popular press about the increasing costs of education, and this is just a graph to give you some sense of that. The popular press is right. The numbers are huge and growing faster than just about anything else that we see. And this trend is more pronounced for the state universities and colleges than it is for the private schools. And I think some of that has to do with actually some of the comments that we heard earlier about state budgets being cut back. Their state budgets are cut back. They cut back in education as well. The schools have to come up with money somehow, so tuition gets increased. It's just an explanation, not an excuse, but that's what's going on. And of course, the question becomes, what's to be done about this? What should be done? Freezing or lowering tuition, that could be done, but it's not clear that that is the right thing to do if we can't deliver the services. Maybe we're not delivering the services in the most effective, cost-effective way. I don't know the answer, but clearly it is something we have to focus on, because tuition is a varying percentage of revenue depending on the type of institution you're dealing with. We have one suggestion on soaring costs in a minute I'll talk to you about. The growth in U.S. post-secondary students has changed or is changing as well, and this is another trend that we're keeping an eye on. The actual growth from 1999 to 2009 was 38%. We had 14.8 million post-secondary students in that time period, in 1999. 36% of the 27 million of 18 to 24-year-olds. 18 to 24-year-olds is our prime age bracket for universities, as you can imagine. By 2009, that went up to 26.7 million, and we had a bigger share, 41% of that age group. And that's great, more people getting more education. But the projected growth for 2009 to 2020 is only 13%. What's happening is we expect the percentages of individuals in that age group to remain about the same. The problem is that age group is not growing anymore. It's pretty flat. So the question is, why does this matter? Well, as you can imagine, slow growth puts pressure on all kinds of things where there was none before. Talks about faculty hiring and promotion, talk about how many different types of classes that we can offer students, so what variety they have in their course offerings, et cetera. Growth covers many sins, if you will, and once growth slows, we have to relook at what we're doing. In terms of accounting enrollments, things are fairly flat, but nothing to panic about. We had a couple of very good years, 2006, 2007 for the undergraduates, and then later 2003, also 2006 and 2007 for graduate schools. But the last few years it's been pretty flat. I won't say as I said, it's not dropping off. It's leveled out. But we are not seeing the explosive growth that we might hope to see. Actually, graduate school, of course, sort of runs inverse to the economy. When there are not many jobs in the economy, people decide they should go back to school and get another degree. So we we have a little counter-cyclicality going on there in our favor. The big thing, of course, that is affecting all of us is the rapid explosion of technology. And one of the key questions we have to ask ourselves is, what kinds of skills do accountants of the future need? That's going to tell us what we have to teach and how we teach it. So it affects the education content, the technologies that we actually teach, and then what do we teach the students about technology? And how do we and the students stay up to date? We as faculty and the students, once they leave the university, let's hope they're up to date when they leave, and then how do they, that would be you, stay up to date throughout their careers? It also is affecting pedagogy and delivery. Classroom technologies have exploded. Many more faculty are using more and more technology in their classroom. Our students are used to it. Our students grew up with technology. And some people are experimenting with totally different course delivery systems. I don't know whether you've heard of this, of MOOCs, M-O-O-C, massive open online courses. This is a new thing. Actually, it was pioneered at Stanford, which I wasn't aware of until recently. Stanford offered 3 computer science courses online for free, completely online. Over 100,000 students signed up and took each of the 3 classes. One course, 160,000 students in over 150 countries around the world. Unbelievable. And all of a sudden, people said, whoa, there is demand out there is need out there. Is this a way to get education out, maybe at a more cost-effective approach that may help solve some of the other problem? It's all experimental at this point. It's clear that this is a good venue for some types of materials, some skill-based material, maybe not so much judgment, although the people who do this are telling me that it works for all kinds of things. Some courses are half online and half in class. We call those hybrid courses, but we are experimenting with all kinds of technology to teach more effectively and to have a broader reach. Social networking is something, of course, we know has taken over the world, and particularly the world of young people. And it's changed how we interact. It's also changed how the way students interact with each other. And I'm told in some of these massive open online courses, the social networking it is almost a substitute for in-class interaction, because the students are talking to each other over social networks across thousands and thousands of miles and working in groups to get group projects done and do whatever they have to do. But clearly it is changing the way our students operate and our students think. This technology thing, of course, is a generational thing. The veterans, up in the top corner of the 4 groups we talk about, the current 18 to 24-year-olds are all millennials, Generation Ys. The current workforce has 4 generations in it, and the biggest of that group, of course, is the baby boomers. 50% of the workforce will be Generation Ys by 2014, and their majority will increase after that. And by 2020, the next generation, that doesn't have a name yet, will be of college age. And this will really be the first generation to have been exposed to internet use from the time they were little wee folks. Bill Gates has called this the internet generation, and I think you people all have children and maybe even some grandchildren, and you can see how these kids operate. It's just part of their life, and that's something that we as educators have to learn how to take advantage of and not try to shy away from, and also meet the expectations of these folks. In terms of research, I'm not going to do a lot of research here because it's not of primary interest, I don't think, to those of you in the room, but one of the things that technology is changing on the research side is how research articles may change. And this is a big part of what academically qualified faculty do. So it's a major concern to them. Typically we write a paper, submit it to a journal, it goes through a peer review process, you get back review comments, you have to make changes to the paper and submit it again and get another set of review comments, and this goes on for 2 or 3 times, and then finally the editor says, okay, good enough, we'll publish it. But what we're seeing now is that this all may change, and we may be putting up the ideas and the data online and let the users do their own analysis, have the researcher start and say, here's how I look at it, but provide everything so that anybody can conduct analysis and rerun the analysis for themselves. We may use it for video to capture the author's insights into what they think their paper means, or watch experiments. Some research designs involve people doing experiments. Maybe we could actually have videos watching that process. And maybe we should have crowdsourcing impact measures. You talked about measures about how state boards of accountancy are doing. Well, maybe you just put it out on the net and just ask people CPAs, how they think you're doing. But this is the idea for research. We have peer-reviewed articles, that we cite each other's work when we think the paper is relevant to what we're doing, and those are the impact measures that we as academics look to. But maybe we could have more individual-based impact measures and critical discussion of the paper online. But things are changing on all dimensions of what faculty do. This year's, every annual meeting of the AAA has a theme. The president has a theme for the meeting, and the theme for our meeting in Anaheim this coming summer, next summer, is Karen Pincus's presidency, is Brilliantly Disguised Opportunities. And so part of the idea here, I think, is to look at all of these challenges and say, okay, these are challenges, let's turn them into opportunities. They may not appear as opportunities initially, which is why she talks about them as being brilliantly disguised, but sort through them and see what we can find as opportunities to expand our reach. As you know, the AAA and the AICPA had the Pathways report. I'm not going to talk about this because I understand Bruce Bain was here last year, the chairman, to talk to you about the Pathways, about elements that are essential to accounting education. The report was issued in August of 2012, so it's out there if you haven't seen it. And there are 7 recommendations, and down with the R process, that's what we're focused on at the moment, because we're setting up these task forces for each of the other 6 components and 6 recommendations to dig deeper and to try to figure out, make sure that the Pathways report is implemented. We've had reports in the past that looked at the future of accounting education, and it's a great report, a lot of thought went into it, and then nobody keeps carrying the ball forward after that. And we're bound and determined that this is not going to happen to the Pathways report, that we're going to set in place a process to monitor how the recommendations are implemented, or perhaps need to be modified or changed as time goes on, but this will be a living document and implemented over time. The Atlanta meeting in 2014 is when I become president, and my focus is going to be on global perspectives and opportunities. As we've said, there are many issues on the horizon for accounting education and scholars, but lurking behind all of them is globalization. And I know you heard this morning from Barry Melanson. I think you hear it everywhere. This is a key force that seems to be changing and touching everything that we do. The thought of going global is daunting to many because, gee, I've just figured out how to deal with what I'm dealing with, or haven't figured that out, and now you want me to think global on top of it. But it isn't about doing things twice. It isn't, I teach global financial reporting. I don't teach US GAAP and then get another course in IFRS. I teach them together because there are a lot of similarities. It's about global financial reporting, not one or the other. And some of it is just changing perspective, remembering that there is a world out there beyond the borders of the United States. And what we need to do, I think, is to focus, the AAA needs to do, is focus on the benefits of adopting a global perspective for teaching, research, and service, our 3 main components, regardless of where we live or work or learn. And my responsibility as the incoming president is to help ensure that the AAA does all it can to help accountants reap these benefits and help us become global thought leaders in accounting when I think about accounting educators and scholars. Everything is global. I don't have to tell you that. Teaching, our students live in a global world. Many of you know better than I, but I'm told that in the U.S., the Big Four audit practice is on the order of 25% IFRS. So when the accounting educators say, gee, I have to teach U.S. GAAP, but I don't have to bother with IFRS, that's not quite right, because when our students go work for U.S. accounting firms in the U.S., they have to learn it. And if they don't know it, the firms will teach it to them. Well, just like you don't like people doing your job, we don't like our people doing our job. If things people need to be taught, we are the educators. We want to do it. The students are increasingly mobile. Many of them have traveled to other countries, and they don't think much about going to work here, there, or the other place. They're comfortable with it. I mentioned these online courses, and I think this is one of the things that just got everyone's attention. We can reach people all over the world in an instant. And the social networking connects these people and ideas. Research, dissemination of research today is global, so is collaboration. I have co-authors all over the world. I get email every day from people all over the world asking me questions about my papers and about how to do research. It's a global community of scholars. And from the AAA's perspective, from the service perspective, more than 25% of the AAA membership live and work outside the United States. And it's kind of interesting that the same thing, or the reverse, I don't know how you want to think about it, is true for some of our sister organizations. About 25% of the members of the European Accounting Association are US. So it's the lines are becoming blurred, and our 25% members come from 102 countries. The top 10 are US, Canada, Japan, Australia, Germany, Taiwan, UK, China, Hong Kong, and South Korea, but the list goes on. And professional organizations are becoming increasingly global, and one of the things that we have to make sure we do is serve these members in a way that they expect. So teaching, research, and service. There we go. The U.S. is on the globe. We'd all like to think it's the center, which is why I drew a circle, but the arrows don't only go out, the arrows come in. And many of the things that happen around the world, as you know, affect us. The financial crisis, Greece, Basel banking regulations, but Sarbanes-Oxley, that was very important to us, also affects the rest of the world. Many other countries ended up passing legislation that has many of the same objectives. A lot of organizations have become more global. International Association for Securities Commissions, the Auditing and Accounting Standards Board, obviously the IASB, Financial Executives International. I put NASBA in here because I'm hoping that you have a global reach. I understand some CPAs, the CPA exam is now offered in several countries around the world. That's just step one. This is a big world out there, and we need to figure out how to make the CPA, for example, the certificate in the world, not just in the US. There are many good ideas that come from outsiders that we need to take advantage of. The world is interconnected and becoming more so. And at least the AAA has to worry about this because that's the world our students are going to live in. And that means it's the world that the profession is going to live in as well. So just to conclude, there are many exciting challenges currently facing the accounting education. The AAA is working to learn about them and develop strategies for dealing with them so that we can turn these challenges into opportunities. It really is a very exciting time because things are changing very rapidly. A little scary, but it is challenging. And we look forward very much to working with NASBA and our other professional counterparts to make sure that there is a bright future for all accountants. We provide the supply, you employ them, you regulate them and license them, and I think working together, we can be a very powerful team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Does anyone have a question or comment to pose to her? I have one or two as well, but I'll defer to the group first, please.
This might be a question for kind of a broad audience, but I guess, you might be as good as any of us to address it. As GAP becomes less relevant, I mean, the U.S. keeps leading with GAP, and we turn around and nobody's there. Everybody's on IFRS. As GAP really decreases in importance, why is the CPA credential still the gold standard?
Oh, boy. It's a trick question, given that I spent 8 years as a member of the International Accounting Standards Board writing IFRS. So I'm a little biased, but I think let me make two distinctions. One is between U.S. GAAP and IFRS, and the other is the CPA certificate. There's obviously the CPA is learning accounting and financial reporting rules and applying them is a key part of that, but it's certainly not the only part of the CPA certificate. And you license people we CPAs have a brand that is, I think, second to none. You heard Barry say that this morning, that this is very powerful. We have a great group of professionals and definitely something to build on. And many people want to become CPAs for that reason. So whether we as CPAs use IFRS or whether we use US GAAP or what we do is, I think, secondary to the profession as a whole. So when I talk about the profession being, potential the certificate, I'm talking about the profession as a whole. My U.S. GAAP is a great set of standards. As I said, I'm biased. I think IFRS has many advantages too. How's that? But that's to be sorted out. That's to be sorted out in the future. That's part of this global thing. The world is telling us that IFRS is okay. Lots and lots of countries have signed on. They don't all do it perfectly, and they have some tweaks around the edges. I'd be the first to admit that. But I think there's something to it. And of course, the SEC has said it's okay for non-US companies who list in the United States to apply IFRS in their financial statements without reconciliation to US GAAP. So it's not a full seal of approval, but again, it's one step in that direction.
Barry, I want to express appreciation for AAA as well as the ASC-CPA to allow two of our members, Kate Mooney as well as Melanie Thompson from Texas, to participate in Pathways, the first phase of it, and express our interest in continuing to have NASBA presence in Pathways Part 2 as it goes on to the leadership of Billy Ezel, I understand.
I will welcome that.
You mentioned something that I wrote down as MOOC. How do you pronounce it?
MOOC. Oh, you got to learn this, Mark. This is the word that you're going to be hearing this.
I got a better idea. If 160,000 people got to take a course for free, then maybe it ought to be mooch. In other words, if they each paid $10, and then that would be $1.6 million, and then the $1.6 million could go to the accounting department, professors like yourself, that would be a great idea, wouldn't it?
Well, you raise a great point, of course, and everybody asks, what is the business model for this thing? And of course, universities are not necessarily solely in the business of making money. As a matter of fact, we kind of don't. That's the budget actually does have to balance. And so part of this is the mission of educating people. Some of it is an experiment to see how things work. But I don't think anyone, well, I can tell you, I don't think anyone at Stanford at least believes that these courses are going to replace the in-residence one-on-one relationships with between faculty and students that we have. This is sort of in addition. But this one-on-one relationship, sitting in a classroom, discussing things is highly valuable, but it's very expensive, and there's a lot more education that we could spread around the world that we can do a lot of good, and not by not having that all the time.
So you'd mentioned the concept of the cost of education rising, but I would think that with technology that it actually should be declining.
Well, that's part of the attraction to these online courses. Of course, now if they cost something to produce, and now I've told you they're for free, so that isn't going to help a lot.
Okay.
But I think by using more technology, we can be more cost effective. We can save that very expensive classroom one-on-one experience for teaching students how to make judgments, for discussing issues, for increasing their knowledge and understanding, and use maybe some of this online stuff more for transmitting knowledge. Get them to do this before they come to class, for those who are coming to class, to just keep what goes on in that classroom worth the money that it costs to do it. And I think that's where some people think that it is more effective.
Very good. Distinguished gentleman from New Jersey, Milton Brown, has a question for you.
You noted in one of your slides that you indicated that there are more and more non-tenured teachers. And what are we doing about that? I mean, that's a serious problem as far as I'm concerned. And I also noted in your remarks that you indicated that we've sort of reached the plateau with the number of accounting students. And I'm glad you did say, by the way, somebody mentioned about, I think you said that not necessarily do colleges, are they concerned with finances? I don't know how much I agree with that either. But what are we doing about the non-tenured situation, which does bother me?
When you say the non-tenured situation, are you talking about
The professors,
not enough tenure-track faculty, or the fact that
Correct.
we are using fewer of them?
No. The fact that there are not enough tenured people around.
Though this is an issue, because there's two reasons for those tendencies that I showed you on the graph for academically qualified and professionally qualified. One is, I think we realize that professionally qualified individuals can add a lot to the classroom and add a lot to our students' learning, and therefore that's the good news. The not so good news is the issue that you raise, and that is getting people to get PhDs in accounting and become academically qualified. And so the fact that that's tougher road, and therefore maybe substituting some.
Do you have any idea of why that's taking place? Is it salaries or what?
It isn't salaries. It isn't salaries, and it isn't demand, because among business school professors, I think the accountants are right up there with the finance people, higher than a lot of other disciplines, even in business schools, let alone other places in the university. So I don't think it's salary. I don't know what it is, and ask you something that I want to give some thought to. People have tried to get, when can we get students interested in getting PhDs? And maybe by the time we approach them in college, when they've taken a few accounting courses and seeing how exciting this stuff is, that they really want to devote their life to it, and they also have an interest in education, to pursue it at that point. But maybe we need to go down to the high school level. That's one of the things that the Pathways report is talking about doing, getting kids interested in accounting as a profession younger. Not only gets them into the profession as practicing CPAs, but also opens up the possibility that they may actually go on and study and get PhDs in accounting. Many people don't fully understand what a PhD in accounting is all about. And so that's something we need to do a better job at.
Thank you.